King County, Washington, where Seattle is located, is under increased scrutiny because their rental assistance program paid a tenant 2 years worth of back rent when that tenant made over $400,000 a year. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News.
It takes three things to qualify for assistance: rent in King County, be at risk of eviction, and have an income level 200% below the federal poverty level.
And I don't see that those conditions are being adhered to in some cases.
King County Council member Reagan Dunn points to a Bellevue case in which the Housing Justice Project paid $88,000 for 2 years of back rent.
That person has reported a $400,000 income, and that is not the kind of income we want to be funding for these very important bailouts.
All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's coming out of King County, Washington, and that's the county where Seattle, Washington is located. So this story shouldn't come as too much of a surprise because, you know what, I'm always talking about how a lot of these socialist programs are filled with fraud, waste, and abuse, okay? And that's part of the reason why I'm so much against them. The other part of the reason I'm so much against them is because it breeds laziness, okay? It creates a system where we have these people who are just dependent upon the government to take care of all of their needs. And eventually it will drive out business owners and people who are actually paying the taxes because they're sick of paying so that these other people can get all of these benefits for free. And it's like they don't understand this when they put these laws into place, that people do not have to put up with this stuff. They will move away. They will leave that place. And the only thing you're going to be left with is a bunch of people who are just sucking the government dry. Okay, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see a whole lot of poor people begging for more socialist systems to protect them. And the wealthy people, the people who are the business owners, the taxpayers, they're going to leave. They're going to leave because they're not getting a good deal for what they are paying. They're getting screwed over royally, okay? And we're seeing this more and more lately. And, just as an example, recently I read about a city in part of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a city in Louisiana that was newly formed. And you know what? The tax base was completely part of the part that separated off from Baton Rouge, okay? And what I personally believe is that the people who lived in that part of town, they saw how the city was being run. They saw how the city was being operated. And they're like, hey, this large group of people over here are basically unaccountable. They are taking up all the resources. All the tax money is going to funding their part of town. And, they're neglecting us, but we're the ones bringing in all the money. So, they wanted to break off. That's my theory. Now, of course, they're saying that it was about schools and all that. But when it comes down to it is we have a lot of people out there and, they're paying the taxes. And they are not getting what they feel like they deserve, okay? And that I'm specifically talking about property owners, but it could be anyone, regardless if you are making over a certain amount of money. Like, look at the way the government treats you. Look at the way that these left-leaning progressive places, such as Seattle, treat the people who make the money. They drive them out. Why do you think that people such as the Amazon, what's his name? Jeff Bezos. He moved to Florida. He left Washington State because Washington State put taxes and rules and regulations in place that made it negative for him to stay there. And he said, I'm out. I'm leaving, okay? It took his money with him and saved hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes just by moving the state. That's it. So yeah, don't think that these people are going to stick around forever. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. Are you surprised that the rental assistance program is filled with fraud, waste, and abuse? Okay, that people who don't need rental assistance were actually getting it. That the landlords who weren't being paid their rent, they're not getting rental assistance. Are you surprised these things were happening? This is typical government program, okay? That's why I'm for small government. That's why I am 100% against socialism. Socialism is big government. Government owns everything. Eventually, that's where all the roads are leading to in these places like Washington, okay? Anyway, let me get into this article. I'm going to explain exactly how this is a problem. What's going on with this rental assistance program? This article is coming from ComoNews.com, and it says King County's $16 million tax fund faces scrutiny over misuse in eviction aid case. Yeah, take the taxpayers' money and then pay it off to people who don't need it. Ooh, yeah, genius. Anyway, let's see what the article says. There's a new fight brewing over just how millions of taxpayer dollars are being spent in King County through the Housing Justice Project. Rents are high in the county, and all it takes is losing a job, a large medical bill, or auto repair to put people behind in rent. The county gave it about $16 million to help those facing eviction. The $16 million the taxpayers put in just in this budget cycle may not be going to where we want those tax dollars to go, King County Councilmember Reagan Dunn told Como News. Sounds like we're being improperly accused, was the response Edmund Witter gave Como News. And you know what? The taxpayers, you know what? I believe that they had good intentions. I believe that the city council had good intentions. But the problem is, right, that good intentions don't mean anything if the way that something is implemented is incorrect. Okay? So you're like, oh, we're going to help prevent these people from getting evicted by giving them rental assistance, right? But instead, you created a bunch of people dependent on the government. You created a situation where fraud, waste, and abuse was easily they were easily able to do fraud, waste, and abuse, and you basically wasted the taxpayers' money because it didn't actually solve the problem. Okay, the problem is expensive housing costs up in Seattle. The problem isn't that landlords are evicting people. That's just a symptom of the problem. Okay, the housing costs are the problem, and what you need to do is remove regulations, make it easier for landlords to rent their properties, make it easier for developers to build new properties, and that will make housing less expensive if there's just a ton of new properties out there. But they're not going to figure this stuff out. I'm all for accountability. It always seems like everyone takes our money and that it's just falling from trees, said Jody, a resident of Capitol Hill in Seattle, who also wants to know where her tax dollars are being spent. When somebody comes to us and they're behind on the rent, we must refer them to rental assistance if they're eligible. And if they're eligible for it, we have to qualify them, Edmund Witter with the Housing Justice Project explained to Como News. It takes 3 things to qualify for that assistance. You have to rent in King County, be at risk of eviction, and have an income level 200% below the federal poverty level. So, my question is, could you manipulate this stuff, okay? And, you have to rent in King County, okay? That's easy to prove that, whether you live in that county or not. Be at risk of eviction. So that means that you, I guess, paid your landlord late 1 month, okay, that would put you at risk of eviction right there, and have an income level 200% below the federal poverty level. Now, keep in mind how income is determined, okay? So there could be people who have 0 income but have a net worth of, I don't know, $10 million, okay? You have $10 million just sitting in cash, not collecting interest or anything, so you have 0 income. And, according to them, you would be 200% below the poverty level, and then they would be eligible for rental assistance. So that, even though it doesn't make any sense, that is definitely a scenario that could be happening. We have wealthy people who are eligible for rent assistance. And I don't see that those conditions are being adhered to in some cases. It's the people who are already in cheap apartments who don't have any place to go as a way to stave off homelessness. And that's what these programs are for, said Dunn. Dunn points to a Bellevue case in which the Housing Justice Project paid $88,000 for 2 years of rent owed by a family. That person has reported a $400,000 income. And that is not the kind of income we want to be funding for these very important bailout funds, he said. So yeah, how did somebody with a $400,000 income end up, qualifying for something where you're supposed to make 200% below the household income for the area, And or it says 200% below the federal poverty level. So it's even lower than the household income for the area. Man, I mean, you have to basically be broke to qualify, yet somebody who makes $400,000 a year did. And how many more cases just like this were there out there that they didn't catch up on, okay? That's the real question. So, yeah, when you put the government in charge of anything, it's going to be inefficient. It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to cost way, way more than it would if you had the private sector in charge of it. So, you know what? Rental assistance in general isn't a good idea. It just isn't. You know, yeah, people could be evicted if they can't pay their bills, but that is something that people have to figure out on their own. That's part of the reason why we say, okay, people need emergency funds, okay? I mean, basic financial education would solve so many of these problems. Basic financial education. But instead of teaching people how to pay their own bills, the government thinks they can jump in, or these left-leaning politicians in particular believe they can jump in, pay the bills for them for a month, and that will solve all their problems, and it never does. So, you know. I'm sorry. I already read that. We have to provide legal services based on the income that they have at the time they come to our offices and are facing eviction, said Witter. Witter said they cannot look at previous income, even if it was what was reported when the tenant signed the lease. Como News spoke with that renter, who told us that he was employed when he signed the lease, but then he lost his job. He also said that his wife has a job, but he did not disclose her income. So yeah, basically, when he signed the lease, he was making $400,000 a year, and then he lost his job, and then I guess was unemployed for 2 years. If they had 2 years of back rent that totaled $88,000, and so then they based their income on not what he was making before. You know, they were basing it on what he was making at the time. So yeah, you know, like, the only thing I could think that would be paying that high, I mean, you know, like software engineers or something up in that area. So, you know, it is what it is. But the question is that ridiculous? Is this within reason? No, it's not within reason. We're talking about a person here who's highly skilled, has highly valuable skills, and is choosing not to work for 2 years so that they can have $88,000 worth of rent paid for them by a government organization. So yeah, this is a complete failure right there. Fraud, waste, abuse. Anyway, if you're interested in this article, I'll put a link to the description, or put a link in the description down below.